Stop crying. Pack your things and get out of my house. Don't spend one more day living off me like a parasite. That's what my daughter-in-law said to me at my own son's funeral. My only child wasn't even cold in the ground yet, and there she was, standing in the middle of the living room I built with my own 2 hands, calling me a worthless freeloader, brushing me out the door as easily as you'd flick away a fly. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. Because she had no idea that the money she thought she'd just inherited, $850,000, had never belonged to her. It was always mine. And so was the house she was throwing me out of. And what happened next? She never saw it coming, until it was already too late. My name is Raymond. I'm 69 years old, and I live on a quiet street called Calle del Sol, on the east side of Tucson, where the saguaros throw long shadows in the evening, and the heat comes up off the pavement like a held breath. I spent 38 years as a certified public accountant. I'm the kind of man who keeps receipts, who labels file folders, who reads the fine print twice. My late wife, Eleanor, used to say I treated our basement filing cabinet like a second marriage. She wasn't entirely wrong. Eleanor passed 2 years before my son. Cancer, slow and merciless, the kind that gives you just enough time to memorize someone's face before it takes them. After she was gone, I downsized everything. I sold her sedan and kept my old pickup. I stopped buying new clothes. I started clipping coupons, not because I had to, but because grief makes a man want to feel useful in small, controllable ways. You count things, you organize things, you hold on to whatever still answers to your hand. People saw all that and drew a conclusion. They saw the 15-year-old truck and the worn boots and the man who shopped the clearance aisle, and they decided I was poor. Decided I was barely scraping by on a fixed income, just another lonely old widower waiting out the clock. My daughter-in-law saw it most of all. Her name was Camille. She was 34, sharp and polished, a commercial real estate broker who wore success like perfume and could read a room the second she walked into it. She'd been married to my son Daniel for 9 years. And from the moment Daniel died, she took over everything. Daniel was killed in a highway accident on a Thursday morning in monsoon season, when the roads turn to glass and the world stops making sense. He was 41. He was an electrical engineer, gentle and absent-minded, the kind of man who'd call me on a Sunday just to ask how I was sleeping. I raised him in that house on Calle del Sol. I taught him to measure twice and cut once on the back patio when he was 9 years old. Losing him broke something in me I'm still not sure has healed. Camille didn't pause to grieve with me. She mobilized. "Don't trouble yourself with any of the arrangements, Raymond," she told me at the funeral home, her hand light on my shoulder. "I'll take care of all of it." And what she meant, I understood even then, was stay out of my way, old man. She chose the casket. She chose the flowers. When I asked, quietly, if we could play the old folk song Daniel and I used to hum while we worked on the house, she shook her head and said it was too sad, that the day needed something more hopeful. So a song my son never knew played at his service while I sat in the same gray suit I'd worn to bury his mother, feeling the floor tilt under me. I said nothing. I have always been a man who says nothing until the moment is right. The first real warning came at the reception, in my own kitchen, surrounded by casseroles from neighbors. Camille pulled me aside, lowered her voice, and told me we needed to discuss my situation. That word. She said Daniel had been supporting me, and now that he was gone, she couldn't be expected to carry that weight. She told me the house was hers now, that everything was hers, that Daniel had left it all to her. I just nodded. She read that nod as surrender. I watched it land on her face, the small flicker of satisfaction, the sense that the difficult part was already over. And here is the first thing I want you to understand about that moment. I wasn't nodding because I agreed. I was nodding because I was doing math. 40 years of habit kicked in, the same instinct that made me reconcile a ledger, and I was quietly tallying every assumption she'd just made and finding every single one of them false. Because Daniel never owned that house. He grew up in it. He loved it, but he never owned a single board of it. And there was a filing cabinet in my basement, 4 drawers deep, that could prove it. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and the story matters more when you feel it the way I felt it, slow and sideways, the way the truth usually arrives. For the next 2 weeks, Camille acted like a landlord who'd inherited a troublesome tenant. She let herself in with Daniel's old key, no knock, no warning. She started erasing us. First it was Eleanor's photographs from the mantel, boxed up and carried to the garage. Then Daniel's childhood drawings, the ones I'd kept on the refrigerator for 35 years, gone overnight. Then my framed accounting credentials off the wall of the den. When I asked her about Eleanor's pictures, she told me she was redecorating, that the place needed updating, as if 4 decades of a family's life were just an old coat of paint. I have to be honest with you here. The money never bothered me. The house never bothered me. What bothered me was the eraser. I want to talk to whoever's listening who has watched a stranger move into a space full of your memories and start treating them like clutter. Maybe it was a new step-parent. Maybe it was a sibling dividing up a parent's house. Maybe it was someone you loved who stopped seeing the years you'd poured into something. That specific grief, watching your history get folded into cardboard boxes by someone who thinks it's trash, there's no word big enough for it. I felt it every single morning that fall. Then Camille handed me a printed timeline. She actually printed it, like an eviction notice, a date circled in red ink. She told me it gave me plenty of time to find a senior community more appropriate for someone in my position. She slid brochures across my kitchen table, places with names like meadows and gardens that smelled, in the pictures, of disinfectant and resignation. One was $800 a month for a single room. When I asked her how I was supposed to eat, how I'd handle medical bills, she shrugged and told me there were government programs for people like me. Food assistance, Medicaid, the state takes care of seniors. People like me, as if I'd never paid a tax in my life. And that's when I understood the real shape of what she wanted. She didn't just want me gone. She wanted me grateful. She wanted me to thank her for 30 days instead of 0, to praise her mercy for not having the locks changed that very afternoon. She wanted me small, and apologetic, and obedient. I sat with my coffee the next morning and I made a list. Not of what I was losing, of what she believed she was winning. The house, which she valued with her own broker's eye at well over $400,000. The life insurance from Daniel's firm, another $150,000 she'd already spent in her imagination. The furniture, including Eleanor's antique hutch and Daniel's shelves of engineering books. Things worth nothing to a stranger, and everything to me. And underneath all of it, she'd made one fatal assumption, that Daniel owned what she was claiming. Married 9 years, and I'd bet she never once saw a deed, a mortgage statement, a property tax bill. Why would she? Daniel handled their household paperwork the way I'd taught him, the way his mother and I had always done it. Quiet, private, unglamorous. She saw him being helpful to me and assumed it ran one direction. She saw a son carrying groceries and driving his father to the doctor and decided that was charity. It was love, but it wasn't money. The money had always flowed the other way. If I'd simply packed my bags and shuffled off to one of those meadows, what would that have said? That the loud win and the quiet lose. That if you're confident enough and cruel enough, you can rewrite a man's entire history. That 40 years of marriage to Eleanor meant nothing. That the house we dreamed up at a kitchen table meant nothing. That the son we raised could be boxed up and forgotten as easily as the photos off the mantel. The stakes weren't about dollars. They were about whether my life had been real. So I went down to the basement. That basement was always my sanctuary. Eleanor used to tease me, called me a pack rat, said no sane person kept 40 years of bank statements. But I wasn't keeping them out of madness. I kept them because I learned young that paper tells the truth long after memory fails and people lie. The filing cabinet stood right where it always had. 4 drawers, each labeled by decade, every folder chronological, every document where it belonged. To anyone else it was clutter. To me it was armor. I pulled the bottom drawer, the 80s, the decade that built my whole life. And there it was. A folder marked with the address of the house Camille thought she now owned. Inside, the original land purchase, dated the spring of 1986, my name alone, paid in full. The construction contract for a custom Adobe-style home, my name alone, paid in cash. And the deed itself recorded that same spring. One owner, Raymond. No cosigner, no joint name. No mortgage, nothing. Camille had been a small child somewhere in another state when I signed that paper. But the folder went deeper. Property tax receipts spanning 38 years, everyone paid by me. Insurance policies, all mine. Utility records, landscaping invoices, all mine. Daniel's name appeared nowhere, not once. I sat on that cold concrete floor and turned page after page, and I felt something I hadn't felt since Eleanor died. Not triumph, steadiness, the quiet certainty of a man standing on ground he knows will hold. And then, in the very back, a folder I'd nearly forgotten, marked private. Inside were the trust documents. Eleanor and I had set up a family trust decades earlier, before Daniel was even born, the kind of careful structure that takes years to build and a lifetime to fund. A bank statement near the top showed the current balance. $850,000 in change. The beneficiary list named Daniel, yes, but not as an heir. As a beneficiary during his lifetime, with terms and conditions Camille had never thought to ask about. After Eleanor passed, I became the sole trustee. Daniel received monthly support for his education, his first home, his wedding, the cushion that let him live the comfortable life Camille assumed he'd built alone. He lived well because I made sure he lived well, and it all stayed under my control. I have to stop and sit in the strangeness of that, because it took my breath away even then. Camille saw my son's comfortable life and assumed he was self-made and wealthy. She saw his generosity toward me and assumed it came from his own pocket. She never once imagined that the money flowing from Daniel to his old father was, in truth, my own money quietly circling back home. That's how assumptions work. You see what confirms what you already decided, and you delete the rest. But there was one last document in that folder, and it stopped my heart for a different reason. Daniel's life insurance policy. $150,000, exactly like Camille said, except the beneficiary wasn't Camille. The beneficiary was the family trust, which meant the beneficiary was me. For 2 months she had been spending money in her mind that had never, for 1 second, belonged to her. I closed the drawer and climbed the stairs and made myself a sandwich, and I thought about timing. Now I want to be honest with you, because this is the part where I'm not sure I behaved like a saint. I could have called her that very afternoon, could have spread the papers across the kitchen table and watched her certainty crumble in real time, but I didn't. I waited. I let her keep digging, and maybe that makes me less than gentle. Honestly, if it were you, after she called you a burden over your own son's casserole, I'm not sure you'd have rushed to spare her either. I let her dig because I needed to know exactly how deep she'd go. She went deeper than I imagined. That Sunday, while I was dressing for church, Camille arrived with 3 of her broker colleagues. She hadn't asked. She called it a consultation about the home's potential. I heard them before I saw them, her voice carrying up the stairwell, describing my life's work as outdated, calling it classic old person style. They drifted through my house like they already held the keys, photographing Eleanor's kitchen, marveling at crown molding I'd cut by hand, planning which walls to gut. I came down the stairs in my church clothes and found 3 strangers cataloging my marriage. Camille's voice went bright and false. She introduced me like an exhibit. This is Raymond, Daniel's father, the original owner, but he's transitioning to a more suitable situation. Transitioning, as if I were a quarter being rolled into a different slot. One of the women told me the house had such character that I must have put real work into it. Some, I said. And then Camille, sensing the room slipping, did the thing that finally moved me from patience toward action. She started inventing flaws. She told them about a roof leak that didn't exist, a failing furnace that was 2 years old, a damp basement that had been bone dry for 20 years. When I gently corrected her, she smiled that tight broker's smile, and told the room that I was very attached to the place, that sometimes I couldn't see problems obvious to everyone else. Then she said it. She told 3 strangers in my own living room that I couldn't afford to maintain my own house, that my social security barely covered my basic needs, that I'd been living off Daniel's generosity for 2 years and now needed to face reality. The room went quiet. Even her colleagues looked at the floor. And here is the part I have replayed more than any other, so let me slow it all the way down, because this was the moment everything turned. I stood in the doorway of the living room Eleanor, and I had painted 3 times over the years. I could feel the heat of the afternoon pressing against the windows. I could see the rectangle of cleaner paint on the wall where my credentials used to hang. One of the brokers, a younger woman in expensive boots, had her phone half raised, mid-photo. Frozen now, unsure whether to keep going. Another was edging toward the door. The third just stared at Camille, then at me, then back at Camille, doing the same arithmetic I'd done weeks earlier and arriving, slowly, at the same impossible answer. Camille's chin was lifted, Her arms were crossed. She believed, in that instant, that she had won. And inside, I felt the strangest calm settle over me, the same stillness I used to feel right before signing off on an audit I knew was airtight. There was a voice in me that wanted to roar, that wanted to tell her exactly what 40 years of reading other people's finances had taught me about people who confuse volume with truth. I didn't let it out. I have spent my whole life keeping that voice on a short leash. Instead, I looked at the 3 women by the door, and I asked them, very quietly, if they'd seen the deed to the house before they started planning their renovations. The silence that followed had weight. You could feel it in your chest. Camille's face drained of color. She said my name, a warning, a plea. Raymond, don't. Don't what? I thought. Don't tell the truth in my own home? But I didn't say any of that. I'd said enough. Sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is hand someone just enough rope and step back. Enjoy your tour, I told them, and I walked out the front door into the Arizona heat to call my attorney. I want to pause here for everyone still with me, because I know some of you have lived a version of this. You've been the quiet one in the family, the one people talk over, the one whose opinion gets waved away because you don't raise your voice. And you've felt that specific burn of being underestimated by someone who has no idea what you're actually capable of. If that's you, I want you to hear the rest of this carefully, because this is where the ground shifts. My attorney was a woman named Patricia, who'd handled my affairs for over 20 years and knew exactly what lived in those folders. When I told her what I wanted, she looked at me over her reading glasses and asked if I was sure, because once we started, there'd be no taking it back. Camille would learn everything. Good, I said. We laid it all out on her desk. The deed, 1 owner, no mortgage. 38 years of taxes and insurance in my name. The trust, $850,000, with Daniel a beneficiary, but never an owner. And the life insurance, payable to the trust. Payable to me. Patricia was quiet, a long moment. Then she asked why I'd let it go on for 2 months. I thought about Camille calling me a burden in front of strangers, the casual cruelty of it, the way she'd erased Eleanor from the mantle. Because I wanted to see how far she'd go, I said. And she went all the way. We made a plan. The insurance claim processed immediately, to the trust, where it belonged. Camille served with formal notice that she was a guest in my house, not its owner, with 30 days to leave, the exact window she'd given me. Complete documentation of Daniel's true relationship to the trust, so she could never again claim ignorance. And one more thing. I wanted witnesses. The same colleagues who'd heard her call me a burden should hear the truth. Patricia called it public humiliation. I told her, gently, that public humiliation was what Camille had done to me. This was public correction. There's a difference. One is meant to make you feel powerful. The other is meant to set the record straight. 2 mornings later, Patricia and I walked into Camille's brokerage on a busy Tuesday. Camille was at her desk with a young couple, showing listings, all confidence and warmth. She looked up when we came in, and I watched her face travel from professional smile to confusion, to something close to fear. She tried to wave us toward a conference room. Patricia introduced herself, attorney at law, here to discuss urgent matters concerning her late husband's estate. The words attorney and estate dropped into that open office like stones into a still pond. Around us, every agent went quiet and pretended to keep working. I'm going to slow this down too, because this scene is the heart of the whole thing, and you deserve to feel every second of it the way I lived it. The young couple at Camille's desk stood up, sensing the temperature change, murmured something about rescheduling, and slipped out the door despite her calling after them. The blonde colleague from that Sunday, the one with the boots and the phone, drifted closer, drawn in like everyone else. Patricia opened her briefcase and laid the first folder on the desk, and she asked Camille, plainly, whether she had any documentation proving she'd inherited the house on Calle del Sol. Camille said the will left her Daniel's personal property. His car, his clothes, his house. Daniel didn't own a house, Patricia said. The words landed and the whole office seemed to stop breathing. Camille said it was impossible, that Daniel inherited the place when Eleanor died. Patricia slid the deed across the desk. 1 owner, recorded in 1986. No cosigner, no mortgage. Camille snatched it up, and I watched her read it, watched her eyes move across my name again and again as if repetition might change it. The paper trembled slightly in her hands. This has to be wrong, she whispered. It wasn't wrong. Paper doesn't lie. That's the whole reason I keep it. Patricia kept going, calm and relentless, the way I imagine I once sounded across a conference table. 38 years of property taxes, all paid by me. Insurance, utilities, maintenance, all in my name. Daniel's name nowhere. Camille sank slowly into her desk chair, the polish draining out of her, and she said the thing that finally cracked her voice. But David, she caught herself. Daniel paid for everything. He told me he was helping you. And I said, quietly, into that silent office, that Daniel had helped me with groceries and rides and yard work. That I had helped Daniel with everything else. Then Patricia opened the last folder. The trust. $850,000. You could have heard a pin drop on carpet. Patricia explained it simply. Daniel had been a beneficiary during his life. I had funded his education, his wedding, his first home, all of it, from my own resources. Camille looked up at me with an expression I'd never once seen on her face in 9 years. Not contempt, not confidence. Something raw and stripped bare. And then she remembered, and she said it like a drowning woman reaching for a rope. The life insurance. That's mine. Patricia laid down the final page. The beneficiary was the trust. The money was mine. Camille looked around the office. Every agent was watching her. The woman who'd been so certain 3 days ago. So sure. So dismissive of the quiet old man. Raymond, she said, and her voice was small now, smaller than I'd ever heard it. I didn't know. And I told her the truth, the only truth that mattered. You didn't ask. She asked if we could work something out, some arrangement, and I considered the silent room around us, and I told her what Eleanor would have wanted me to understand years ago. Respect isn't negotiable. It never was. You have 30 days, Patricia said. The same timeline she'd handed me. And we turned and walked out. And the silence behind us said everything that needed saying. I'm going to be honest about what came after, because it's the part that taught me the most. The story moved through that real estate world like fire through dry brush. Within a week, 3 of Camille's clients had asked to be reassigned to other agents. The logic was brutal and fair. If she couldn't determine who owned the house she'd lived in for 9 years, how could anyone trust her with theirs? That young couple who'd fled her desk posted about it online, something about dodging a bullet, and it spread. Her broker called her in. And in the end, quietly, by mutual agreement, she left the firm. She lost the house and the job in the same stretch of days. And I want to be clear about something, because it matters. I didn't do that to her. I never called her clients. I never called her broker. The natural consequences of her own choices did all of it. There's a difference between revenge and accountability, and I've thought about that difference every day since. Revenge is something you inflict. Accountability is something a person earns and then collects. I simply stopped shielding her from a truth she'd refused to ask about. Everything after that was the world responding to who she'd shown herself to be. Her attorney did reach out once, asking if she could stay on as a tenant, offering rent well below what the house was worth. Patricia and I agreed we'd consider a fair market arrangement, the same we'd offer any stranger. Camille couldn't manage it, so she made plans to move. This story taught me something I'd half known my whole life but never said out loud. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who has nothing to prove. The mistake almost everyone makes is believing the loudest, most confident voice belongs to the strongest person. Usually it's the opposite. Usually the loud ones are loud because they're afraid, and the quiet ones are quiet because they already know what they're holding. What Camille never understood, what almost nobody in that brokerage understood, was that humility is not the same as helplessness, and silence is not the same as weakness. So if any of this reached you, here's the one thing I'd ask you to actually do. Find the quiet person in your own life, the one who never performs their worth, the one who shows up without making noise about it, and tell them today that you see them. And then sit with this question, honestly, the way I had to. When you size someone up, are you reading who they actually are, or just who they appear to be? Because the gap between those two things cost Camille everything she thought she had. Then there's the part I didn't expect. About 3 weeks after she moved, Camille came back to my door with a cardboard box. Inside were Daniel's baby photos and Eleanor's handwritten recipe cards, things that had ended up in the wrong hands during all that erasing. She set the box down and looked around the room she'd planned to gut, and said it looked the same. Some things don't need changing, I told her. And then she said she owed me more than an apology, that she finally understood Daniel had learned his kindness and his quiet strength from someone, and that someone was me. She told me she'd found work in another city, a fresh start. And before she left, she asked me if she'd been respectful from the beginning, whether things would have gone differently. I told her the truth. Probably, I'd have helped her find her feet. We might have honored Daniel together instead of fighting over what he left behind. She nodded, and she said she guessed respect really wasn't negotiable after all. And she was right. I want to hear from you now, because I've carried this long enough to know there's no single right answer. If you think I did the right thing, staying calm, letting the document speak, letting her dig her own hole, comment the number 1. If you think I should have told her the truth immediately, and spared us both those 2 awful months, comment 2. And if you think I should have stayed silent entirely, packed my bags, and just let it all go, comment 3. I read these. I want to know where you land. And tell me, where in the world are you watching this from, and what time is it where you are right now? Drop your city in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Most of all, I want to know, have you ever been treated as worthless by someone who had no idea who you really were? Tell me what happened. Tell me what you wish you'd done. We learn more from each other down there than from any story I could tell alone. If this meant something to you, do an old man a small kindness and subscribe. I sit here telling true feeling stories about the quiet kind of strength the loud world keeps overlooking, and every single person who follows along tells me to keep going. I'd be honored to have you here. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Tucson, Arizona to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.